Baochai really laid it out in the first phase. She was like, "Hey Tanchun, you're a rich girl who's never had to deal with real stuff, the big issues. But now you're here. It's just too bad it's too late." She could see that Tanchun was all fired up with ambition. But Baochai had a feeling that it was all going to go south in the end, and it's just a shame it's too late. So, getting into this whole joint contracting and leasing thing might bring in some cash for the Guan Garden, right? Like, at least 400 to 500 taels of silver a year, which would take some pressure off the money guys. But, let's be real, this is just an economic crisis thing. The real deal problem with the whole Jia family, this reform ain't gonna fix it. What's the problem? The power struggle between the two parties. No matter how you carry out economic reforms, it's useless. You can't resolve the power struggle between the two parties through these reforms. When will the conflict reach a boiling point? Before the government comes to conduct an official search, they've already started investigating themselves. This is what's behind it. We are coming to the chapter entitled The Slander Investigation of the Guan Garden. One thing led to another. What thing? It's that retarded maid laughing while holding a sachet. What's the pattern on the sachet? It's an erotic image. She found it in the garden and was laughing, and someone heard her. Who? It was Lady Xing. Lady Xing didn't know what she was laughing about, so she asked her, "What are you laughing at?" Then she showed Lady Xing the sachet, which had an erotic image on it. Even though there are many dirty things within the family still adheres to the moral and ethical standards of the time. How can we have such a thing in our family? Lady Xing, the moment she saw that sachet, she saw it as her chance to take a swipe at the ruling faction. She went straight for Lady Wang, showing her the sachet, and boy, did it ruffle Lady Wang's feathers. Her first reaction was like, "No way the young girls here could have this. It must belong to a married woman." And who did she immediately suspect? Xifeng. She was dead certain that Aunt Feng must have had it and lost it in the Guan Garden. Lady Wang wasted no time in confronting Aunt Feng, who was freaked out, knowing that Lady Wang was onto her. Xiren got down on her knees and swore, "It's not mine, I swear." And when the cat was out of the bag, what went down? They had to search every nook and cranny. They turned the Xiaoxiang pavilion upside down, right? They even went through the Yihong mansion, and they didn't skip Li Wan's place. And where else did they search? They went through Tanchun's place, and Qiushuang's studio got a thorough going over. Tanchun knew the scandal had hit the fan and got her maids to open the doors and hold up candles, ready for whatever was coming their way. Madame Xing's henchman is a maid called Wang Shanbao. Then, Aunt Feng had to tag along, following Madame Wang's rules. When they got to Tanchun's place, Tanchun was on fire. She said, "You can only snoop around my stuff. I'm the boss here, and I've always been tough as nails. All the loot my maids swiped is stashed by me. You can only snoop through mine, not the maids. You get one search, and this time, do it thoroughly. If you come back, I won't allow it." As she blabbed, Wang Shanbao thought she had scored some points. Normally, she couldn't stand Tanchun but couldn't do anything about it, you know. Now she had some clout, and she said, "Miss, don't worry, I will search everything, even on you." As she spoke, she lifted Tanchun's skirt, and Tanchun turned around and gave her a big slap. "Who do you think you are? A servant dares to touch me," she started scolding her. With this slap, Wang Shanbao lost face and started crying, saying, "I don't want to live with this shame." While she was talking, Tanchun turned to her maids and said, "You're all usually so chatty, why are you quiet now?" As soon as she started, all the maids came and began to verbally attack Wang Shanbao. Tanchun was really fierce. Her maids would all speak now because they followed her. During this uproar, Tanchun uttered a very heart-wrenching phrase. She said, "For a family like ours, when an opponent attacks from the outside, it may not be immediately fatal. As the ancient adage goes, a centipede dies but never falls, while the self-inflicted end leads to utter defeat." With tears streaming down her face, nobody around understood her words, and even Xifeng, who showed no reaction, failed to comprehend. At this moment, Tanchun finally saw her own failure. No matter how you try to reform, you cannot resolve the infighting between the two factions. What will it ultimately lead to? Self-destruction. This reasoning is correct. The fortress is breached from within. The Europeans also understand this principle, as evidenced by the story of the Trojan horse. The Trojan horse illustrates the best way to defeat the enemy, from within. Tanchun was like, "We were just talking about the Zhen family getting their stuff taken away, and now it's happened to us. I can't see a way out of this mess." Baochai probably knew it was coming, right? It's a shame it's too late. That's why I was talking about how to understand Dream of the Red Chamber yesterday. It's not as simple as it seems. We've tried both Confucianism and legalism, haven't we? Can we save this falling apart palace? I don't think we can fix it. No wonder the end of Dream goes like that. In the 12th song of Dream it says, "Those who have figured it out let go, and those who are too caught up have wasted their lives for nothing." It's like birds seeking shelter when they've run out of food, leaving behind a whole wasteland. See what I'm saying? We've seen the family tragedy, and really, Cao Xueqin used the characters and their fates to think about the destiny of all of China, and their fights and how it all turns out. When we talk about Wang Shifeng's character, we're basically talking about her tragic situation. You can see how messed up things are for the whole Jia family after Wang Shifeng's been running the show for so long, especially from what happened to Tanchun's family. It's like the family's in a deep financial crisis. And that's just one part of it. The whole power struggle between the two sides is getting worse and not getting resolved, and we'll see more of that later. Take Lady Wang, for instance. When her son Xue Baoyu got a real beating from his dad, almost to the point of death, right? Later, Lady Wang was like, "How did this happen? What's the deal?" So she secretly asked Xiren, right? She asked her in her own room. But before she asked, Lady Wang made sure there was no one else in the room. Why? Who would be in Lady Wang's room? Her maids. She only dared to ask Xiren after making sure there was no maid around. You know what this tells us? Lady Wang knew there had to be a maid who was a spy for the other side, so she only asked when there was no one else around. It's pretty shady in there. And Xiren, she's pretty sharp too. She knew what was up, but she acted like she didn't. She kept her guard up and didn't want to get caught up in the power struggle. Lady Wang kept telling her, "You can tell me, and I won't say it was you," to make her feel better, but Xiren still didn't say anything. That's pretty impressive. We've got to talk about another character, Baochai. Xiren is like Baochai's shadow. Remember we talked about Qin Kaching before, and also kind of touched on Xifeng and Ping Er, right? So now let's dig into this important character, Xue Baochai. Talking about Xue Baochai also means getting into Xiren, because Xiren is Baochai's shadow. Then there's Qingwen as Daiyu's shadow. When Cao Xueqin couldn't write about Baochai, who did he write about? He wrote about Xiren. And when he couldn't write about Lin Daiyu, who did he write about? Qingwen. So, when we discuss Baochai, we gotta bring up Xiren too. In my opinion, Baochai is someone who perfectly balances virtue and accomplishment, and that's no easy feat. You know, When you set out to achieve something, that's the accomplishment part. But once you've done it, what usually happens? You end up compromising on moral standards and principles. You might stick to the moral code, but often fail to get the job done properly, right? That's just how life goes. Can you be morally upright and still succeed in your endeavors? In the book, only one person manages to pull this off, and that's Xue Baochai. But what's the deal with Baochai, right? She's like the biggest mystery in the whole book. When we talk about the 12 beauties of Jinling, we're always like, what's the deal with this person? Can't figure her out. The whole image of Baochai has caused a ton of back and forth among scholars and readology fans, hasn't it? Some people sing her praises, while others tear her down. Check this out. There's always been this big debate. Back in the Qing dynasty, someone wrote this book called San Jie Lu Zhui Tan. In it, the author talked about his buddy Xue Baochai. They were tight, but then they got into it over Dream of the Red Chamber. Xue Baochai was all about respecting Xue and dissing Lin, giving major props to Baochai and dissing Lin Dayu. He thought Dayu was too sharp-tongued, while Baochai was all dignified and stuff. The author of San Jie Lu Zhui Tan thought Xue Baochai had been totally fooled by Cao Xueqin. In the spring of Ji Mao month, me and Xue Baochai were talking about this book, and we just couldn't agree, so we ended up arguing and almost throwing punches. The author's wife, You San Jie, stepped in, and from then on, they could talk about anything except Dream of the Red Chamber. They swore not to discuss Dream of the Red Chamber because of this. Who's giving props to Baochai and dissing Dayu? They're coming at it from totally different angles. In modern times, let's say late Ming and early Qing, there was this guy Tu Ying, who was like a big shot in the Dream of the Red Chamber scene. He wrote this book called Questions and Answers on Dream of the Red Chamber. And check this out, there's this really interesting dialogue. Someone asked Tu Ying, Baochai seems perfect. There's hardly anything to criticize about her. Even if there are some minor flaws, what are they? Why do you always criticize Baochai? And Tu Ying goes, Baochai is deep-minded. People should be straightforward. Being too deep is not cool according to the Spring and Autumn Annals. Confucius put together the Spring and Autumn Annals, which is like a history book, right? Confucius had this basic rule for judging historical figures: if someone isn't straightforward, they get downgraded. The good guy is straightforward and loves justice, while the bad guy is sneaky and loves money. Then the person asks, what would you do if you met Baochai? I'd marry her. Let's not worry about whether Baochai would marry him, but what he said is spot on. Would he like Baochai, fall in love with her? Nah, she's too deep for that. But she's the perfect wife material. In ancient Chinese society, big families were like multi-generational households, right? When a guy gets married, he's dealing with several generations, right? While he's out working, the home front can't be ignored. The main wife is the most important. She's not just dealing with the in-laws, but also the guy's siblings and the whole concubine system. In wealthier families back then, guys would have several wives, and the main wife had to deal with the concubines. It's a tough situation, and the guy can't handle it all alone. You need someone like Baochai to manage all those relationships, right? So, she's the perfect wife material. Xiren shares Tu's opinion. Who does Xiren really want Baoyu to marry in the future? Baochai. She knows she'll always be in a lower position, right? Baoyu's relationship with Xiren is after he wakes up from the dream in chapter 5, right? After waking up, Xiren serves him, and when she serves him, Baoyu understands the matters between men and women for the first time, because he learned it in the dream, right? So, he had an experience with Xiren, and it can be said that Baoyu had his first taste of love and intimacy with her. After this incident, from then on, in Baoyu's eyes, Xiren is different from other maidservants. So, in Xiren's heart, what is Baoyu? I will definitely follow you for the rest of my life, so the relationship between these two is actually that of husband and wife, not just a normal master-servant relationship, right? So, Xiren is quite formidable, right? Who is Baoyu afraid of when she is by his side? He is afraid of Xiren. He dares not disobey her advice, so we can imagine that after Baoyu gets married in the future, he will definitely be a person who is afraid of his wife, this is for sure. Baoyu is such a clever person, she knew about their relationship a long time ago, she could see it. So, one time, when Baoyu and Xiren were having some unpleasantness, Baoyu went into the room and said to Xiren, sister-in-law, if there's anything unpleasant between you, tell me, I will help you sort it out. She directly called Xiren sister-in-law. Xiren was shocked, how could you call me that? But actually, Baoyu was right. So, the thing that Xiren is most worried about is not knowing who will be above her in the future, and she most hopes it will be Baochai. Later on, there was this thing that everyone knew about, Xifeng. Who did her man Jiao secretly marry outside? You San Jie. This whole thing got exposed later. And after it was exposed, what did Sister Feng do? Hey, she's quite something. She just went ahead and invited You San Jie to her home when Jiao wasn't around, treated her really well, right? Kept her at home and slowly did her in. And how did she do it? Used someone else to do the dirty work. Who did she use? Qiu Tong, right? On one occasion, Jia saw that his son had made an achievement. He was really happy and rewarded him with a servant girl named Qiu Tong. She used to be a servant girl by Jia's side, and she was quite pretty, wasn't she? So, Jiao could never turn down a pretty woman, right? Hey, he just brought her in. When the two of them first got together, they were all lovey-dovey, right? Just left Miss Yu on the side. Then Sister Feng used Qiu Tong to stir things up, and when Qiu Tong took the K, of course, she started fighting with You San Jie. Later, You San Jie ended up committing suicide by swallowing gold. When she died, the whole Jia family actually knew who really killed her, and of course, they knew all about it. Upon hearing and seeing all that, Xiren felt really down. I mean, being a servant girl is tough enough, but now there's this powerful Sister Feng calling the shots above her. So, what was Xiren up to at that time? Well, Baoyu was off at school during the day, leaving her with nothing to do at home except for some needlework. But as she stitched away, her mind kept drifting back to these worries, making her feel all jittery. She mulled it over and came to the conclusion that Granny Jia was so into Baoyu that she might end up with Baoyu in the future. Xiren was totally convinced of this. And who would be in top spot then? It would definitely be Baoyu, but she's not the easiest person to get along with, so Xiren wanted to suss her out. So off she went to the Xiaoxiang pavilion. When Xiren got there, Baoyu treated her really well, knowing that she wasn't just any old servant girl. She offered her a seat and served her tea right away. Once they were settled, Xiren started talking. She said, "Some things in this world just ain't fair." She went on, "Being a servant girl is already a lowly position, so why make it even worse?" Then she brought up Sister Feng and how she pushed You San Jie to her death. Baoyu was puzzled by all this. I mean, Xiren never gossiped about people behind their backs, so why was she saying this stuff now? Baoyu, being sharp as a tack, replied, "It's hard to say. In this world, it's either the big fish eating the little fish, or the little fish eating the big fish. Even a servant can bully someone higher up. It happens. So, it's not always the big fish eating the little fish, or the little fish eating the big fish. When Xiren heard this, she got even more worried, realizing that their relationship might turn into a real battle. Our old chairman used to run the show at the Central Work Conference, you know? And every time he did, he'd kick things off with some random chit-chat to lighten the mood. One time, he goes, "Hey, do you guys know who said the east wind overpowering the west wind?" And everyone in the party was like, "Huh?" Then he goes, "It was Lin Dayu who said that. If it's not the east wind overpowering the west wind, then it's the west wind overpowering the east wind." Nobody really reacted, and the meeting just carried on. It's pretty interesting, right? This little detail really drives the point home, doesn't it? Dayu never tries to win people over like Baochai, right? Since you're asking, I know what you're getting at, so I'll just tell you straight up, this matter is hard to say.